Hey, I'm Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. Hey, hit like and subscribe and all that. Tell your friends about the show. Help me grow the channel. Also starting a private group, members, where we can talk about things that are probably not quite allowed on this platform. And there'll be more one-on-one, and we'll be discussing alchemy, which a lot of people don't find very interesting, but some people are really interested by it. So I don't want to get into the weeds of alchemy on this particular show too much because it's such a complex subject. But I am going to talk about alchemy today in a sense. So if you go through ancient alchemical literature, going back, 800 years or so, including the Arabic text, you see a huge emphasis on oak trees and mistletoe that grows on oak trees. James Fraser wrote an entire book, The Golden Bough, about European goddess worship and the mistletoe. The golden bough being mistletoe. It turns gold in the fall. It's one of the ways you can identify it. And so I was always been interested in why these oblique references were everywhere in all the books I was reading. And then in the early 90s, I got introduced to a very old French alchemist. He was probably in his early 90s at the time. So this would be 30 years ago. And he was going around curing people of stage 4 and stage 5 cancer using mistletoe. And so I got in an email thing with him, and also regular letters. And I said, what is this? And he said, well, what you need to do is pick mistletoe only from oak trees. He said, put it in mason jars, and then pour alcohol over it, make a tincture, in other words, over the entire jar, seal it up, and let it sit in the cool, dark place for 18 months. So in 2004, I believe it would be around January of 2004, I did my first mistletoe batch. I found a group of oak trees that had mistletoe, and I took it down and I put it into mason jars and bought the alcohol and put it in there and did everything like he told me to do. And 18 months later, so it'd be like September of 2005, I had my jars of mistletoe tincture. So I strained all the leaves and stems out of it, and I was left with about 3/4 of a jar, a mason jar, with a dark green liquid in it, and began taking a few drops a day, which is what he told me to do. Now, Rudolph Steiner, he must have been reading the same literature I was, because he became interested about 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, in mistletoe too, and began writing about it and advocating for it. And so the certain factions of the alchemical world were beginning to look into mistletoe as being some kind of healing agent. So about a month and a half ago, I received a letter from someone you guys would know, but since it's a private letter, I can't really say who it comes from. Hang on here. And he wrote me and he says, Jay, I'm getting deep into biophotonics. In researching, one learns it is all about coherence. Till that, only one plant tested out of several thousand so far results in increasing coherence in biophotonic emission at the cellular level in animals, including humans. Wait for it, mistletoe. So a really good researcher, who I'm not going to name because he didn't give me permission, is doing biophotonics and discovered that mistletoe increases cellular coherence in humans and animals. Now, my story is very interesting. So I began taking the mistletoe in September of 2005, yes. And I took it every day religiously, and I was in pretty good health. I went through a lot of stress in 2012 when I started working for Gaia. I was working 14, 15 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, and I would have constant flu-like symptoms. I never actually get full-blown sickness, just kind of, tired and runny nose, and that was from the stress, I'm convinced of it. But I never really got sick. So then in about January of 2016, I realized that I was running out of mistletoe, that the stuff I'd gathered up in 2004 was now being depleted. I had very little left. And so I mounted an expedition to the Pacific Northwest in must have been, June of 2016. We went there to Oregon, and we got mistletoe from the oak trees that grow there in up I-5, the highway there. A lot of oak trees with mistletoe on it, and we packed up, another case of mason jars. And we put the tincture in it. Now you got to realize that this is June of 2016. So these guys aren't going to be ready until January of 2018. So somewhere in 2017, I ran out of mistletoe for the first time in 12 years. I did not have any. And I believe it was probably late summer of 2017 is when I ran out. And so for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't taking mistletoe. And something started happening. In October of 2017, I began suffering serious fatigue and stomach problems, and I was having a lot of trouble at getting any energy at all. And I was still working full time at Gaia, so it was really, I would fall asleep at my desk. I would just fall asleep. And I didn't really, I wasn't really quite aware of that. I was in this deteriorating situation. And then finally, this all culminated in January of 2018, when I was diagnosed with colon cancer and was rushed off to the hospital, had a major operation. I was out of commission for about 3 weeks. And the doctor told me that, the cancer wasn't that bad, and I didn't have to have any kind of therapy. So I went back, but now my mistletoe was ready because it was going to be ready in January 2018. So now I had a huge amount of mistletoe extract. And so I started taking a lot at that point, like much more than I did before. Like I upped the dose by probably 5 times the amount. And I'm still doing it 5 times the amount. And, knock on wood, I'm so far so good. I'm fine. But along the way, just like a month and a half or so ago, this book came out by 2 oncologists. Oncology is the study of tumors, and which cancer, study of cancer. And these 2 doctors, Stephen Johnson and Nasha Winters, who are both oncologists, were looking at some of Rudolph Steiner's work, and they realized all the references that he was making to mistletoe. So they began a serious study of it. Now, also, if you remember Susan Summers, I think she was in the show Three's Company, a beautiful blonde, I think she was an ex-model. She got, I believe it was in like mid-90s, she got stage 4 breast cancer. And I remember seeing her, I think, on Larry King. And he asked her, is she getting, what treatment? She said, I'm not doing any treatment. I'm being injected with mistletoe. And of course, at that time, I knew that it had efficacy. So I perked up and kind of followed her case. And she got rid of her cancer through the mistletoe. So these guys started studying mistletoe from an oncologist's point of view. And what they discovered is that people who get mistletoe injections, that's how they do it. I take it orally, but they do it with injections. That people who get mistletoe injections have remission, the cancer remissions. And people who are taking chemotherapy and are also taking the mistletoe don't have the severe side effects that they have, losing your hair and all that. And it, it looks like it is a very, very cheap anti-cancer treatment that they have discovered, and they've written this book all about it. It's just come out. It's a really good book. It explains the medical history of mistletoe, how it's being used all over Europe, and it has been used all over Europe for 100 years or so by oncologists who are trying to, stop cancer. Now, I will tell you this: the alchemist who told me first about mistletoe in the 1990s, he disappeared. He was complaining to me around 1995 that the French version of the CIA was after him. And I was very concerned. And then he disappeared. And I have to wonder if he wasn't his taking these stage 4, stage 5 cancer victims and then giving them mistletoe was not, causing some angst among the medical community. I don't know where he went, but he did disappear. So mistletoe is what I consider to be the convergence of medical science and alchemy. And we don't know where the original information about mistletoe came from. It looks like it came from the Druids in Ireland, who worship the oak trees, of course. And what's interesting is that in alchemy, they talk about the nigredo, which is the black substance that is the prime materia. And Fulcanelli and several other alchemists talk about you have to find the black water, that the alchemy begins with the black water. And I was living in Central California in the 90s, and we had oak trees everywhere. That's where I got my mistletoe, my original mistletoe. And one day a limb broke off one of these giant hundreds of year old oak trees, like 50 feet high, incredible black oak trees. And the branch broke off. And for probably 3 days, nothing but black water poured out of that oak branch. And literally gallons and gallons of black water. And of course, I'd read my alchemy and I was like, is this the black water? So I began a real serious research into oak trees. And I found that oak trees breathe. And what they do is during the night, they breathe water up into the tree. And then in the daytime, that water goes down and out. And so over a 24-hour period, the oak tree will bring water up into the branches and then let it out. And it's hollow. They're hollow. So the whole tree fills up with water that is black. And then I started thinking, okay, so the mistletoe is growing on the branch of the tree with its roots into this black water, not into the ground like every other plant on earth. Mistletoe is one of the only plants that does not grow in the ground. It grows in the tree. And so the oak tree is also super susceptible to lightning strikes. Frequently in my hikes through the woods, I will come upon, I'll be hiking through pine trees that are 100, 120 feet tall, and I will come by an oak tree that was only 40 feet tall, but it's the one that got struck by the lightning. In other words, the lightning is super attracted to oak trees. And the reason being is that oak is almost like oak wood is like almost as close to granite as you can get in a wood. It is fine crystals. Ships that used to be built with old growth oak were impervious to cannonball strikes. They would just bounce off the oak. So oak is a very special wood, and I believe it has highly electrical qualities. And I believe the black water is a conductor of electrical, piezoelectric currents that the mistletoe is like taking and putting it into itself. And so since a mistletoe is not rooted in the ground, it keeps its charge, so to speak, which is why the Druids said that you can't let the mistletoe ever touch the ground, that when you cut it, you have to use a gold knife. Gold is a superconductor. So you have to use a gold knife, and you have to make sure that it does not fall to the ground. So they would put sheets up, 2 or 3 feet above the ground, and let the mistletoe fall onto the sheets and very carefully make sure that it doesn't touch the ground. And I believe that's to keep its electrical nature, which is what is the reason behind its healing propensity. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a healer, and I'm not giving medical advice, and I don't think any of you should be taking anything that your doctor doesn't recommend. But these are doctors, and you can get a doctor, and you can get mistletoe injections. And I don't know if it'll help you or not, but if you're suffering from cancer, or you're, have a high degree risk of cancer, I highly recommend that you read this book. It's called Mistletoe and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology by Dr. Stephen Johnson and Nasha Winters. And it is an excellent book. And I really, really do believe that that mistletoe is going to become one of the most important low budget healing plants for our future. As cancer rates increase, and they are because of the toxicity of our environment, we need to find cheap, low budget ways of reversing all of this. And I believe that alchemy has given us mistletoe as a way for us to do this. And again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I have studied my alchemy, and I have read this book. And I really, truly have to say that I'm really hopeful about all of this. And of course, it is all about coherence. And that's the reason that Mistletoe works, is because it's not grounded. Its electrical nature is still intact. So that's all I got to say about that. And I want to thank you all for watching. I'm Jay Weidner, and this is Reality Check. And really and truly look into what I'm saying, because it's super important. If you live in places like Texas or California or the West Coast, there's a lot of mistletoe on the oak trees there. And people think it's a weed and they get rid of it. So the weed is actually one of the most important plants that is being produced in nature. So anyway, I'm Jay Weidner, Reality Check. Thanks for watching. Have a good life.